Hi, my name is Jeff Powell, and I'm going to talk to you today about ransomware. Uh, First off, a little about me. I'm a fifth year CSET student at the University of Toledo, and I expect to graduate in the spring. I also work as a full-time Geek Squad agent. My job there usually includes helping people with any of their technological issues that they might have. Those technological issues would include offering support with phones, computers, tablets, printers, routers, really any sort of technological device they have issues with. I try to help them with it. I'm also, when I work there, I repair many of the computers checked in and have seen all sorts of problems, including hard drive and hardware replacement problems. I've done virus removals, computer tune-ups and upgrades, and have fixed many simple OS issues. But I've also seen and resolved many ransomware issues as well. Okay, so how did malware known as ransomware, get to where it is today? Ransomware got its start in 1989 from a guy named Joseph Pop, who had nicknamed who nicknamed his malware AIDS. This malware didn't operate the same way ransomware operates today. It used something very similar to symmetric cryptography, which used the same key for both encryption and decryption, making it relatively easy to crack. This software would hide files, encrypt those files, and delete extensions of those files, and then ask for around $189 to decrypt those files. However, since it used this symmetric cryptography, or this form of it, people found that they could find the decryption key within the code of the malware and were able to save their data most of the time once they figured it out. And since this key was used over and over again, eventually they were able to catch Joseph Pop and then later arrest him. However, he was found mentally unfit to stand trial, so currently today he is in a mental rehabilitation center and is still there. Later, around 1996, Adam Young and Moti Young gave this method of malware name, its first name, which they called cryptoviral extortion. It was called this mainly just because it was a virus that would encrypt files and then extort the user by holding those files ransom. More recent years, we've started to see more variations of ransomware. They've all seemed to get little nice nicknames such as Croton, Cryzip, Trojan Ransom, GP Code, and CryptoLocker. GP Code is one of them that became a big deal really around 2008 because it actually began using more advanced encryption methods. These keys were not the same every time, as you saw with Joseph Pop, and they were actually very difficult to crack since they used a 1024-bit RSA key. And that type of key made on encryption almost uncertain. And even more recently, we have been seeing many variations of CryptoLocker. The big difference here is that it asks for a payment using bitcoins. And for those of you who aren't familiar with bitcoins, Bitcoin is an online cryptocurrency that has gotten pretty big in the recent years, mainly because it's not regulated, and you are able to send large amounts of funds easier and faster, as well as being more anonymous with it. You can actually be almost completely anonymous with it if it's done the right way. So using this payment allows the attackers to ask for even larger amounts of money, and helps them stay hidden when they receive the money. So yeah, CryptoLocker also uses a 2048 RSA key, making it nearly impossible to crack. Ransomware isn't just encryption and decryption, as mentioned earlier. There are many variations of it that affect more than just Windows operating systems. It can affect Android phones, Macs, Linux servers, iOS phones, and almost any network device out there. The type of ransomware you usually see on those devices is known as lockout ransomware, which basically locks out the functionality of the device and then asks for money to unlock the device. Usually you can get around this by disconnecting your device from the internet, or resetting your device, or booting into safe mode. This type of ransomware is usually pretty simple to get around if you know what you're doing. Even recently, though, there's been many more attacks. They've moved on from targeting not only single users, but have also targeted companies such as hospitals, banks, other major entities. So one of these attacks was the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, who immediately paid a $17,000 ransom in order to keep the medical center operational, so they could continue to help people and save lives, and maintain their business. So instances like this prove that people are willing to pay large amounts of money when targeted by ransomware, which is mainly why this type of attack has become so frequent lately and is getting more frequent. So successes like this eventually led to one of the most devastating ransomware attacks in 2017, known as the WannaCry attack. You may have seen this on the news. This ransomware would still encrypt all your files and ask for ransom to be paid in Bitcoin. However, the big difference was that this was the first strand of ransomware to use what's known as Eternal Blue, which exploited a vulnerability in Microsoft's server message block protocol. Microsoft eventually did come out with an update to fix this vulnerability. However, by the time that they did that, it had already hit thousands of users, including banks, hospitals, schools, law enforcement agencies, financial centers, stuff like that. So how does ransomware work? Basically, ransomware comes through phishing scams by going to an incorrect website or a false website that appears to be legitimate, and having you download a file. It also comes a lot of times through emails and spoof emails that may look like an offer from Amazon or eBay or some other shopping network, or even look like a FedEx or UPS shipping email or something of that nature. It will actually hide the extension using a common Windows feature, and then to make the file look as if it's a PDF file. However, when you open that PDF file, it actually runs a .exe file, which will almost immediately begin encrypting the data on that computer that it's ran on. So this will begin encrypting any files the user can read and write to. So for most normal users who are infected, it would pretty much begin encrypting anything on the computer, including pictures, music, documents, videos, downloads, favorites, anything you can think of on there. Once it's finished with the computer, it will start moving on to devices connected to that machine, which would include any flash drives you have on there, external drives plugged in there, devices networked to it with no security, would also be targeted. So as soon as you notice your computer's infected, the best thing to do to save your data without paying the ransom, of course, would be to definitely not restart your computer. So make sure you don't restart your computer. Doing that might end up causing issues to the shadow copies, which is one of the only ways you're going to be able to recover your data. So definitely don't restart your computer. Also, you want to immediately disconnect it from any networks and remove all external data devices connected to your machine. So as long as you have your shadow copies in good shape, you should be able to restore your data and get rid of the infection. Otherwise, if you don't have a recovery of some sort or backup, you'll have to just completely reload the OS and lose your data, unless you want to pay the ransom, which is not the goal here. So prevention is probably the best way to deal with ransomware. So you should always have regular offsite backups. So this means that they should not be readily available to the user and should be disconnected from the main host. So basically, like, you shouldn't be able to access it without having to do something like plugging in your device or something of that nature. Another great prevention tool is to use third-party cloud storage, such as Microsoft's OneDrive or iCloud or Dropbox or anything like that, Google Drive. So these would be viable options since these files are backed up to a read-only server and cannot be affected by the encryption. Other options would include the use of access controls. So the use of access controls would prevent an infection to spread throughout a whole company's system, since the affected user probably only has permission to write and read specific files and cannot access the entire company's portfolio of files. So yeah, and then education is very important as well. So as long as the user knows the proper steps to take to combat ransomware, then it can usually be easily resolved. So as long as your data is backed up, the worst case scenario with the ransomware infection would be wipe your system, reload your OS, and then put your data back over. And finally, it's just some recent statistics on the ongoing ransomware attacks. So far throughout 2017, one thing has been abundantly clear is that ransomware is still dominating the world of security. Not only has there been more attacks on more businesses demanding even more money, they have become even more sophisticated with even more attack vectors and are showing no signs of stopping. So last year, on average, a business was attacked with ransomware every 2 minutes. This year, that has increased to 1 every 40 seconds, which is a big increase. And then on the individual base, last year an individual was attacked every 20 seconds. Now this year, increasing to every 10 seconds, so twice as much there. Another statistic is ransomware is now the malware of choice. 6 in every 10 malware attacks are ransomware attacks, so it is actually the most common malware attack being used now. And they have more than quadrupled in frequency from this year from last year. 15% of businesses in the top 10 industry sectors have already been attacked at least once. The majority of these attacks being in the healthcare, education, entertainment, financial sectors. And then email related, 64% of malicious emails were actually delivering ransomware. So majority of malicious emails are ransomware attacks. So it's very important that you don't get fooled by spoof emails or any sort of fake malicious email. Also, the average ransom has increased quite significantly from $294 to $1,077. And of that, 1 of every 5 people that have paid the ransom never got their files back. So just because you paid the ransom doesn't actually mean you'll get your files back. So it really doesn't make sense to pay the ransom unless you absolutely have to. But if you go through the proper steps and back up your data and just be educated on ransomware, then you shouldn't ever have to pay that ransom. And as long as more people are educated, then maybe ransomware won't be as big of an issue. Thank you.